Hi guys, XtremeTrainz here. So this is a bit of a different video. This is essentially going to be like a little bit of a video essay critique of why I think Thomas Wood failed, what it was trying to do, and what it then didn't do, and then didn't succeed. So a bit of a different video this time. Bear with me, I haven't done anything really like it before. So make sure you let me know in the comments below. But otherwise, there's a lot of talking ahead. So let's do it. Why Thomas Wood was created. I think there were a couple of things. The first one is super obvious, is that they wanted to make something that was cheaper to produce. And I think that's evident both in the lack of paint, but I think that's less of an example, to be honest, because I don't really think the painting would have added that much cost. Paint is actually pretty damn cheap. So I don't think that was the primary cost driver. I think the main one to me was in the same way we saw with Trackmaster 2, they really tried to limit the production cost of that, in that they only had one size of engine, one size of tender, one type of coach. They had two pieces, there was like only two pieces of track. There was the single piece of straight track that was one size and the single piece of curve track that was one size. Like, I think those things were how they were trying to reduce the production cost of them rather than the paint. I think that was like this will be a bit cheaper, but also we'll do what I'm going to talk about in the second and third options. Or my opinions rather, and that was how they were approaching that. So I think people saying, oh, the lack of paint was a cost-cutting measure, I actually don't think it was as much of a cost-cutting measure as the actual redesign of the engines in the system itself was. So then I think the second thing they were trying to do with Thomas Wood was kind of, I want to say, align the brands a little bit more. But I think what they were trying to do was and this is where I think the unpainted look comes in as like a bonus thing that was cheaper, but also they were trying to kind of like align the brands so that they had a kind of different spectrum, because they were really going for, that kind of Thomas, the Adventures / diecast was meant to be your cheap basic entry level, and then you had your flashy, Trackmaster motorized line, and then you kind of at the top had this like, deluxe kind of premium wood line. So I think the reason they tried to, align the brands so they all kind of had a similar look, a similar feel, and I think the rebrand of Thomas Wood in that way, I think, was meant to try and bring those so that they had that alignment through those brands. We can talk about whether that worked in a second. The last thing I think they were trying to do with Thomas Wood, from my understanding and my viewing of the products, is they also then wanted to differentiate it from the other lines. And I think this is also where the lack of paint came in. I think they wanted to make it really clear, and I think they actually did say that they said in some media interview or some documentation or something somewhere which said something like, we want kids and parents to, when they pick up a Thomas, in the toy box pile, when they pick up a Thomas, they know from looking at it which line it belongs to. And I think that really does speak to why they went for that non-painted look, because then straight away you would be like, oh, this is a Thomas Wood item, because it does have a very different look to the very brightly colored Trackmaster and push along lines, and also obviously those are differentiated because you've got that wooden feel, that kind of classic feel. So I think those, to me, I think were the three things that Mattel was trying to do with Thomas Wood, and as we're going to talk about, they really mess all of them up. But I would love to know your thoughts. And this is the second part of the video. So why did Thomas Wood fail so badly? The first one is the obvious one. It's that there was the new look of the trains, which, as I said in my reviews, initially I was pretty skeptical of. I've kind of warmed to it. It kind of has this weird charm, I think, to it, the non-painted engines, but some of them really did look very bad. And I think that is it was a bit of a double whammy. It wasn't just that they were reducing the paint to get that exposed wood kind of look. It was also that they were doing the whole redesign of the engines. And I just think you had engines like Kevin, engines like Salty, which just look awful. Like, they are truly awful, and there's no reason they had to be that bad, especially Salty. Like, why didn't they narrow down the sides of his, like, hood? I don't understand. So I think that was the first thing, and what that meant is that a lot of people really, I think, switched off the brand. They saw this new line, and they really didn't like it. I think there was some interesting stuff going on, which I flagged in some older videos and never got around to actually making. Where you could see, particularly on Amazon, there was a lot of reviews that were really, really positive. Like, oh yeah, like, I love the new Thomas Wood, I love the new connectors, I love the new look, so premium. And then you would go down, and if you clicked like expand review, because they were quite long, you would see that it said like product provided by Fisher Price. And I know all companies do things where they bribe, well, not bribe, they give out free samples and, they hope they're going to give you a positive review. Lego does it to this day. Mattel has also, I think, probably still does it. Hasbro does it, I know as well. So all companies do it. But I think this one was particularly they obviously knew that what the sore spots were going to be, and they kind of, it seemed like, made these people try and say the right things. Because then if you looked at the real people reviews, like the ones that said verified purchase, all it was like, why does he look different? Why is the paint missing? What happened to this line? My kid doesn't like it. I don't like it. This doesn't seem good. And so I think the new look really didn't stick. And I don't know, I love these focus groups they get. It's the same as the Thomas Magic Railroad focus groups. It's the same as all these different, focus groups you can find. I think the moral of the story of focus groups is I think you can find a focus group to say whatever you want them to say. That'd be my hot take on them. But I think that the new look really just didn't fly with people. It really wasn't very nice. And there was a reason, my reason number 3, I think, is part of the reason why it didn't work. But I think just people were quite shocked. It was a big change. And I think importantly, the change didn't make sense. Like, there was no need, I think, for them to both redesign the engines and take away the paint and do that new detailing. I don't think anyone was asking for that. So I think what it felt like to a lot of parents and, collectors and probably kids too, is that it was change for the sake of change. And I think that meant people were pretty upset with how it happened. I think the next humongous fail that was Thomas Wood was the new track. And again, I think that was cheaper to produce, but the side effect meant that it had 2 harms. The first was that you didn't get the same connectivity with other brands and even the previous lines as you used to. Which I know obviously they did with Trackmaster Revolution, as they did with the Adventures and Take and Play and all that kind of stuff. But I think it really did feel like with this one, every other brand external to Thomas and Friends uses those same connectors, and it was a huge slap in the face for Mattel to try and use these. And again, they created the problem of oh, you can't connect it the wrong way, and it's yeah, but you could just flip the other pieces around and they would also work. It was that classic marketing of we create the problem and then we give you the solution in one kind of nice, neat packaging, but I just don't think it worked. And I think what was equally sneaky, and that's what I commented on in most of my reviews, is that were compatible with other systems, asterisks, and included those nasty, cheap little plastic adapters in the sets. And I think that was something which made people probably pretty upset, pretty annoyed, and it just, again, was super unnecessary. I think the other flow-on effect of the new track is that a lot of the new sets, and that's what I was talking about, were just not good play sets. They didn't give you much track. There wasn't a lot to do with them. There was the absolutely garbage in terms of play value lift and load set, which just didn't even give you a loop. I think they tried to, branch out and I think separate the Thomas Wood from the track system. I think the problem with that is, again, Take and Play already does that, or, Adventures, whatever you want to call it. That system, I think, is, of all the systems, has been the one that least required the track, I think. And that has always been my impression of that brand. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Obviously, minis also don't really have tracks, so that makes sense. But it seemed like they were trying to take the track element away from Thomas Wood, which I always think taking trains away from their tracks kind of defeats the point. You might as well just have a car then. That is essentially there's no difference. But I think particularly what they were trying to do is separate those away, so you could have Thomas Wood engines and just kids play with them on the carpet. But I know as a kid, building the new tracks and trying to make new layouts and new railway sets and getting new track pieces so I could make new combinations and put things in different places was it was like a Lego set. That was part of the enjoyment of building trains, is that you did build these tracks and try and make them really interesting and complicated, and you always want to have a big hill with a crash and a big yard, lots of points and all that kind of stuff. And I don't think you can do that with that new track system because, it meant you couldn't use your other tracks properly. It also had such limited pieces, there was only that one straight, that one curve, and then the couple bits of points and stuff. And I think what that meant is that then you also had that combined with having these sets, which really didn't have much track, meant it was really hard for people to get invested in this system, which I think really damaged people's connection to it in a really harmful way. And I think the big kicker, which is the third problem of why Thomas Wood fell apart, was just the pricing was really off. It was way, way, way too expensive, given the cost-cutting measures, both you could see really obviously, i.e. the lack of paint, and you couldn't see as much, which was the reduction in the size of the engine and that kind of thing. And that, I think, left a really bad taste in people's mouths. Like, I think if Mattel, understandably to some extent, wanted to reduce the cost of the line, I think it's fair enough to say that, you know, in the modern day and age where, you know, smartphones and tablets can, you know, you buy it once for $100 or $300 or something, and you can have unlimited apps, which are often free or very close to free. I think it is, you know, an important consideration that you want to make toys that are as cheap as possible so that the barrier to entry for people buying them is lower. Because, you know, then it's not like, well, I could spend $100 on this train set, or I could spend 50 cents on an app. It's like, I could spend 50 cents on an app, or I could spend $10 on this train, and it's less of a difference. And so I can understand why, you know, they wanted to do that. But I think the problem was that they cheaped out on the production and they didn't lower the prices accordingly. So when, for example, we saw the change to Thomas Adventures from Thomas Take and Play and that kind of thing, there actually was a price drop on the engines. Like, they did drop the prices by, I think, $2 or $3 each, which was really great because it meant suddenly, you know, the little Thomas engines were like $5. They used to be like $8 or $9 or something, and then they were $5, which was like a really good amount. In Australia, it's the smallest note you can get, so that like worked perfectly. And that, I think, was really good, and it showed that when they reduced the kind of size and complexity of the engines, they passed it on to the consumer. The problem was they didn't do that with Thomas Wood. They kept it with the very expensive, you know, original Thomas pricing, but it, like, to literally anyone who's bought the product before, they knew it wasn't the same thing. And I think that really meant people were, like, looking at that being like, this does not, like, they've made these changes I didn't ask for, and they're charging the same amount for what's obviously a lesser product. And I think that was a huge mistake on Mattel. They should have dropped the price by at least 25%. And then that would have, so it was priced, you know, just above Trackmaster. And that might have worked out better for them. But yeah, as it was, they really stuffed that up. And I think particularly they stuffed that up given that there was so much, for example, plastic in a lot of the sets. So the destinations were insanely expensive for things which had so much plastic. They were missing basic things like they didn't have much track, or, you know, the transfer set, the cranky one I think it was, which didn't have a freight car in it. You know, all those kind of things which are super, super obvious, and they just missed them, you know. And I think what that meant was they had really obviously made the line cheaper to produce, didn't pass it on to the consumers, which meant people who were already a bit like, whoa, this is a bit weird, me included, were just like, well, you know, stuff this, it's really way too expensive for me to even bother. I think the fourth reason why Thomas Wood failed was then that they had that hugely awkward backtrack re-release, which just, I think, to be honest, I think that actually stuff is the reason Thomas Wood died, actually. Because what obviously happens is, you know, firstly, you have to do this weird, awkward re-release to all of your retailers. And that's why essentially, like, the fully painted Thomas Wood essentially never came to Australia, really, I don't think. Because retailers got this product, wasn't selling very well, and then Mattel, I assume, sends them an email being like, sorry, we're not doing that anymore, we're sending a new one, sorry, can you wait, blah, blah, blah. And you'd be like, well, what's the point? It wasn't selling anyway, I'm just not going to order it. So I think that, you know, the initial slump because it wasn't painted was made worse by the fact Mattel pulled the stock essentially back, stopped sending them new items, stopped sending them new models, and said like, oh, hang on, wait, we're going to redo it. And it just meant you lost the energy, the momentum, you lost the care. Retailers stopped stocking the engines, as I've talked about in my videos, and so you literally just like couldn't buy Thomas Wood anywhere in Australia after that the painted versions came out. Essentially everyone just stopped stocking it because it was too hard and they got stuffed around by Mattel too much. The next reason I think that killed Thomas Wood is that obviously, as we saw from all the cancelled products that never got released, like there were digital renders of them, there were mock-ups, they were presented at trade shows. Like, there's a lot of time and effort and money that goes into producing the models of engines. So, you know, for example, that Flying Scotsman, which I really wanted to get there, you know, and all those international engines and stuff which just never got produced. The whole destinations, like the CAD and online design work, they would have made a bunch of prototypes, like they would have had the production stuff probably set up and ready to go, and they had to throw that all away because they just need to redo the whole thing. Like, they would have had a whole production line set up for these Thomas Wood toys to not be painted, and they had to redo the whole production line. And that stuff is super duper expensive, which what that meant then is that the amount of wood they had to sell to recoup that losses was suddenly probably like double what it would have been before. And, you know, given the stuff around with the retail channels, given all the changes, it was just never going to do that. So re-releasing, I think, actually probably made it less likely Wood was going to succeed, because it couldn't just carve out its own new niche as being the unpainted, you know, this new look, whatever. It had to not only recoup the costs of the first redevelopment, but also the second redevelopment. and also the copying of all the character designs and stuff that they just never produce. And I think the last part is what that meant, the flow-on effect of all of that, was a bunch of really popular characters just got super delayed. Like, the Nia and Rebecca were delayed because they had to do non-painted versions. Toby and Edward were delayed, and Henry were delayed because they were doing non-painted versions. A bunch of the sets got re-released. That caused heaps of confusion because you're going online and you were shopping for them, and it was like, am I going to get the picture is the non-painted one, and then the next picture was the painted one? Which version we're going to get, no one knows. I think all those delays meant people who were keen, again, like, what, thinking about new parents trying to buy their kids a gift, why would you try and stuff around trying to get Thomas Wood, like maybe you had as a kid or you like the quality, when right in front of you is the Trackmaster alternative, which is cheaper, is the Take and Play motorized, diecast, whatever you want to call it, push along, which is cheaper. And hey, they've got Nia, hey, they've got Rebecca, hey, they've got these other characters that I'm looking for that my kid keeps asking about. Why would you bother and wait for the Wood one like a year later or 2 years later for some of the characters? When you could just get the other brand straight away. So then the problem was people who were just starting out went to those other lines, and then it just meant you lost a lot of momentum from that brand, because then people aren't buying it, so then stores don't stock it, so blah blah. So I think the re-release actually killed Thomas Wood quicker than if it had continued along in the unpainted form. And I think that is evidenced by the fact that so many of those cancelled items just never got re-released. Like they just never got fully painted versions. They just disappeared. There's actually one more reason why I think Thomas Wood failed, and it's a little bit like kind of not Mattel's fault, but kind of is. I think the demise of Toys R Us, which was one of the biggest Thomas and Friends supporters, but particularly Thomas Wood, it was the only place that consistently stocked Thomas Wood items that I knew, went bankrupt. And what that obviously meant is the big launch retail channel, like that was where the new Thomas Wood was launched, was lost. And I think that really probably did a lot of damage because, only premium retailers picked up Thomas Wood in the first place, and they suddenly lost a massive amount of market. So I think, to some extent, Thomas Wood was a bit cursed because it got launched and then, it went bankrupt. Toys R Us went bankrupt. So maybe that was outside of Mattel's control. Maybe it wasn't, but I think that played a big role in why Thomas Wood didn't work out. And I think the last reason that Thomas Wood just failed is it just wasn't a good value proposition compared to Thomas Wood, like a Wooden Railway toys, I should say. I think my previous points I've already talked about why it didn't make sense for parents to buy it when there were, 2/3, if you count minis, other Thomas lines that they could just buy instead for their kid. But if you were someone who was like, no, I really want to give my kid like premium quality toys, and so you were someone who wanted to buy Wooden Railway, like wood things, stuff like Hape Railway exists, and you can see that on the screen, and like look at what you get for this $100 set. Like, you get 2 engines, you get a station, you get a crane. I think this is slightly discounted. I think what I have seen this in Australia for is about 130, but even then, right, like you get 2 whole loop systems, you get a bridge, you get all these extra accessories. Like, remember what it cost for the Thomas figure 8 set when it first came out, and that came with like Thomas and Bertie, and that was like it. Like a tiny little figure 8. Like, the value for Thomas Wood was not there. If you wanted to get Thomas Wood product or wooden products, you could get way, way, way better value from buying the other brand sets. Brio even is expensive, but you just get way more. They're fully painted. There's lots of more choice of trains. There's lots more choices of sets. Like, even things like if we look at the Rail expansion pack, like this was a 24-piece set for like $30. Whereas, remember, like those Switch sets, or the Switch set was alright, but the Curves and Straights set was like $25 or something, or $20, and it had like 6 pieces of track in it. Like, insane. I just don't think, if I was a parent who was, and this is what my parents did, they actually bought me Brio because it used to be cheaper than Thomas and Friends, apparently. Maybe it always has been. I think it always has been a little bit cheaper. I think Thomas Wooden Railway was always a bit more expensive. But again, because it used to be very premium, it could justify those expensive prices, apparently. But yeah, when I was a kid, and if you go back and watch my very old channel review of review/video in 280p or whatever it is, of my old Thomas Wooden Railway stuff, you will see that I actually have I had a lot of Brio track because my parents would buy me the Brio track because it was cheaper. And they would just buy the Thomas and Friends engines to use on the Brio track. And I think that is precisely what I would be doing if I was going to, as a parent invest. I would get one of the, this Hate Busy Rail City set, and then I would just buy like a Thomas and an Annie and Clarabelle or Percy or whatever for my kids and be like, yeah, look, blah, blah. And it's way better. But the problem was that it used to be that then if a kid goes, I really want Tidmouth Sheds, or I really want Knapford Station, or I really want Cranky, you could just be like, oh yeah, whatever. You could just buy the Cranky and you could just connect it straight into the stuff you already had. Now, Thomas Wood means you can't do that. You have to use the adapters and stick stuff around. So you just wouldn't do it. Like, you know, you would just buy the no-name Hape crane instead. And you'd say, you know, as a kid, my parents did that all the time. You know, that you'd just buy the no-name station and you just pretend that it was Knapford Station or that it was something else. So I think the last reason Thomas Wood was just never going to succeed is even competing against other wooden railway brands. It just wasn't a good value proposition. The value wasn't there. The quality wasn't there. There was just no reason why, as a parent, you would choose to buy Thomas Wood and get invested in the ecosystem, which is what you want to get like a longevity for customer and value out of every customer that buys your products. And it just baffles me. Like, did they not do market research when they launched this? Like, it just, for a company that has only ever made toys, Mattel is embarrassing with how bad they are at making toys. You know, just goes to show you that capitalism doesn't always reward the most productive and the best ideas. Sometimes it just lets companies like Mattel exist. So, you know, there's that.
So then, briefly, my final thoughts on Thomas Wood. Well, it was a ride. It was a ride. It's got me a lot of content on this channel because I have had an interest in reviewing it. So I guess I'm going to have to try and find another Thomas line that they review or to review. I don't know whether that new Thomas Wood thing, the replacement that we've seen hinted at with the new merchandise for the new show, is also cancelled. It's a bit unclear at this stage, but maybe I'll pick some of that up if it actually does happen. Who knows? I'm curious to see what happens in the future with the new show. But yeah, I guess that's it with Thomas Wood. I'm going to keep my eyes peeled for some of those exclusive items that I want to try and pick up, like the Day Out with Thomas 2021 item, but it's proving like the internet doesn't really know it exists very much, let alone trying to buy it anywhere. People have asked me a couple of times about trying to buy the other sets that have come out in Thomas Wood and whether I'm going to do that. Look, I've realized the ship sailed. I really did want to get the Busy Island set. It looked pretty cool, but I just couldn't find a good price for it, and now it's like $400 to get it imported to Australia. And you know, you're not supposed to talk about money on YouTube, but you can, you know, look at how many viewers I get on my content, and you can see that I do not make, you know, have enough people watching my videos to buy things like that, unfortunately. So that is that. I obviously am keeping my eyes out for any special deals, because I know there was a lot of special deals when, you know, they replaced the unpainted wood. You know, I got that Knapford Station, the second one, for like $40. So I'm going to keep my eyes out. But yeah, I don't think there'll be any big purchases of those big sets anywhere near full price, just because, again, as I've talked about in my videos, and let's talk about in this video, the value is just really not there. Especially because, you know, I'm not a kid, I'm not going to be playing with them. I collect them, and I do have plans to make some YouTube videos with them. But I haven't had a chance to do that yet. So that is kind of where I'm at with Thomas Wood. Doesn't mean there's obviously not lots of stuff to talk about. You might have seen my story. I've ordered the Tomix Okinawa. I don't know how to pronounce it. The Japanese one where they painted the Japanese engine look like Thomas. I've ordered that engine from Tomix. Obviously the new Barkman all the Barkman N-scale stuff I'm going to be looking at. I've ordered that Nindroid Japanese Thomas is on pre-order as well. There's a bunch of other train stuff I've got to want to talk about. It isn't just Thomas and Friends. It's been bubbling away in the background. So there's definitely plenty of Thomas stuff to come. I'm still hunting down Thomas Minis, even though they seem to have disappeared in Australia as well. But yeah, obviously you guys have any suggestions or comments or feedback or thoughts on this video, I would love to hear them. That is the reason I do this. I don't want to just yell in the void. Hopefully other people will yell at me back. But otherwise, as always, thanks for watching. That's all we've got time for. This is XtremeTrainz.